The little boy's voice cut clean through the noise of the entire room, not loud, not demanding, just clear. The way a child's voice gets when they have decided something and nothing in the world is going to change their mind about it. Every conversation in that hall stopped, not gradually, all at once. Like someone had cut the sound feed to an entire building and left nothing behind but the hum of the ventilation system and the distant clink of a champagne flute someone forgot to set down. Kael Omolade felt the blood leave his face before he even registered what was happening. He had been moving fast through the service corridor, balancing a tray of canapés, scanning the crowd for his section, doing the mental math of how many more hours he had left in this shift. The venue was packed. A private investor showcase in the heart of Dallas, Texas, the kind of event that cost more to attend than Kael made in a full year. The walls were dressed in warm amber lighting. Women moved through the crowd in Chanel and Hermès. Men checked Rolex watches between conversations about crypto market positions and stocks market volatility. The air smelled like money and cologne and something floral that probably had a French name Kael could not pronounce. He had left Saurin in the back lounge 40 minutes ago with a juice box, a coloring book, and strict instructions to stay put. The babysitter had cancelled 2 hours before the shift started. He had no backup. No family nearby, no one to call who could get to him in time. So Saurin came with him, tucked quietly into a room past the service kitchen, hidden behind a door that locked from the inside, except the door was open now. And Saurin was standing in the center of the main reception hall, in front of a man Kael had never seen before in his life, or at least that was what he told himself in the first half-second. The man was tall. Not in an exaggerated way, but in the way that made every room feel slightly smaller when he walked into it. Dark suit, black on black, cut like it had been stitched directly onto his body. No tie, no pocket square, no jewelry except a single thin ring on his right hand that caught the light just once before going dark again. His face was still, not blank, still the way still water is still. Calm on the surface and completely unreadable beneath it. Saurin was holding his hand. Both hands, actually, the way children hold on to something they have decided belongs to them. And Saurin was looking up at him with those wide, serious green eyes and saying again, quieter this time, like he was confirming something he already knew. Marry me. Hi viewers, have you ever had a moment where a child said something so innocent it accidentally blew up your entire life? Drop a yes or a no in the comments right now, because what happens next will make you understand exactly why Kael's heart stopped in that room. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The polite kind. The kind that happens when wealthy people do not know whether to be charmed or uncomfortable, and they choose charmed because it is safer. A woman near the bar pressed her hand over her mouth and smiled. A man in a grey suit leaned toward his companion and said something low that made the companion laugh. Kael was already moving. He set the tray on the nearest surface without looking. He crossed the room in 8 steps that felt like 80. He reached Saurin, dropped to one knee and wrapped both hands around his son's small shoulders. Saurin, his voice came out even, calm, the kind of calm that takes everything a person has to manufacture. Baby, we talked about this. You were supposed to stay in the back room. Saurin turned to look at him. No guilt, no apology. Just that expression he got when he was absolutely certain he had done the right thing. He looked lonely, Saurin said simply. Kael looked up. The man had not moved, had not laughed, had not done the polite thing of stepping back and pretending the moment did not happen. He was looking down at Saurin with an expression that Kael could not name. Not amusement, not irritation, something heavier than both of those things, something that sat behind his eyes like a weight he had been carrying for a long time. Then those eyes moved to Kael, and for 1 full second, 3 full heartbeats, neither of them said anything. Kael stood. He straightened his uniform jacket. He looked directly at the man and said in the most controlled voice he owned, I am so sorry. He is 4. He does not understand the setting. It will not happen again. He picked Saurin up, settled him on his hip, and turned to walk away. No, the word was quiet. It was not a shout. It was not even loud enough to carry past the immediate circle of people around them, but it landed in Kael's chest like something physical. Like a hand pressed flat against a door he was trying to close. He stopped. He did not turn around. He kept his voice level. Excuse me. The boy dropped something. Kael turned slowly. The man was holding out a small object. Round, silver, hanging from a short cord. Kael recognized it immediately because he had tied that cord himself, 3 years ago, around a piece of old jewelry he kept in a box at the back of his closet and should never have let Saurin find. The charm, his hand moved before his brain caught up. He took it quickly, too quickly. He shoved it into his jacket pocket and kept his face neutral. Thank you, he said. Flat, final. He turned again. This time he made it 4 steps before a hand touched his arm, not the tall man. Someone else. Kael had not noticed him approach. Different build, broader, a half smile on his face that did not reach his eyes. Another black suit, another quiet confidence that felt less like calm and more like a man who had never needed to raise his voice because other people always moved first. You work events like this often? The second man asked. His tone was conversational, light, the way a conversation sounds right before it stops being casual. Do my job, Kael said. Excuse me, of course. The second man stepped aside. but his eyes tracked Saurin with an attention that had nothing to do with the child's sweetness or the funny moment that had just played out for the crowd. Kael walked. He found the service door. He pushed through it. He put Saurin down in the back corridor and crouched in front of him and exhaled through his nose very slowly. "You cannot do that," he said quietly. "You understand me, you cannot walk up to strangers." Saurin considered this seriously. He didn't feel like a stranger. Kael opened his mouth, closed it. He smelled like the picture, Saurin added. Kael went very still. "What picture? The one in your box, the one you think I don't know about?" Back corridor was quiet. The muffled sound of the event filtered through the walls, glasses and voices and the low bass of background music. Kael looked at his son, at the green eyes that did not come from him, at the jaw that was already sharpening in a way that had nothing to do with Kael's own face, at the way Saurin tilted his head when he was waiting for an adult to catch up with something he had already understood. Kael stood. He pulled out his phone and texted the shift supervisor that a family emergency had come up. He was leaving. He would return the uniform tomorrow. He picked up Saurin again and moved toward the side exit. They made it to the street. Cool night air. The hum of traffic 1 block over. A ride share 3 minutes away. Kael exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour, then his phone buzzed. One message. "Unknown number, you left something behind." Kael, more valuable than the charm. He stopped walking. Read it again. Read it a third time. No one at that event had introduced themselves. No one had exchanged numbers. No one except the shift manager even knew his name. He looked up from the screen. Across the street, parked in front of the building's secondary entrance, were 3 black vehicles. Not moving, engines off, just waiting. The windows were tinted dark enough that he could not see inside. His phone buzzed again. This time it was not a text. It was a notification from his banking app. "Transaction pending, account under review." The ride share arrived. He got Saurin into the seat, buckled him in, closed the door, and stood on the curb for 3 seconds looking at those 3 vehicles. Then he got in the car. He told himself he was overreacting. He told himself it was a coincidence. He told himself the same things he had been telling himself for 5 years. And somewhere in the event hall behind him, 2 men stood beside the tall, still man in the black suit, and the one with the half-smile said quietly, "That's him." And the tall, still man said nothing, but he did not take his eyes off the street. The memory came back in pieces, the way broken things do, not as a story. As a sensation, the smell of leather chairs in a closed conference room. The sound of a financial summit running at full volume 3 floors above a service kitchen in Midtown Manhattan. A 23-year-old Kael Omolade pressing his back against a cold wall after spilling an entire tray of water glasses across the shoes of a hedge fund director who had immediately turned red and started to shout. New York. 5 years ago. A private summit for the kind of people who do not appear on public lists. The humiliation had been immediate and complete. The director's voice had cut through the kitchen corridor loud enough that the other servers looked away the way people look away from car accidents. Kael had been on his knees gathering glass when a shadow fell over him, and a low, even voice said simply, "That's enough." To Kael, to the director had gone quiet. Not because he wanted to, because something in that voice made argument feel expensive. Kael had looked up. 3 men standing at the corridor entrance. Same height, same stillness. Dressed in black, each of them, like the color was a uniform they had agreed on long before the evening began. Identical in bone structure, the way only triplets can be, but separated by everything underneath the surface. The first one, broad and sharp-eyed, watched the room like he was calculating odds. The second one smiled with the ease of a man who had never once needed anything he did not already have. The third one stood slightly behind the other 2 and said nothing at all, but Kael felt his gaze the way you feel a change in temperature. He learned their names later that night. Cashin, Darian, Lucen, Viley. He had heard the name before, the way everyone who worked financial events had heard it. The Viley triplets. 3 billionaire alpha brothers who had restructured 2 banks, moved the crypto market with a single press release, and made the stocks market flinch with a dinner conversation. Old money crossed with newer, sharper, more aggressive money. Their father had been one of the most powerful men on the eastern seaboard before his health pulled him back from public life. Kael had not planned to speak to any of them again after the corridor, but the summit ran late. The kitchen staff was held over. And somewhere after midnight, Kael had found himself on an access stairwell with Lucen Viley, who had come down from the main floor for reasons that were never fully explained, and who had sat on the steps without any of the performance that wealth usually carried with it. They had talked. Not about money, not about power, about smaller things. The kind of conversation that does not feel important until later, when you are lying awake in a different state in a different life, and you realize it was the last honest thing you said to another person for years. Kael did not plan what happened. He was not sure Lucen did either. What he knew was that by the time the night ended, and the summit cleared out, and the city went grey with early morning, something had shifted in a way he did not have language for yet. 3 weeks later, Kael took a pregnancy test in a gas station bathroom outside of Newark. He sat on the floor for a long time. Then he thought about what it meant to be a male omega with no legal standing, no documented relationship, no family connections, and a child growing inside him that carried the blood of one of the most powerful families in the country. He thought about what men like the Vileys did with leverage. He thought about lawyers and custody agreements written in language designed to leave him with nothing. He thought about Cashin's calculating eyes and Darian's easy smile, and the way power had always, every single time in his life, decided that people like him were temporary, so he did not call, he did not write, he packed 2 bags and a box, drove south and built a life in Texas out of whatever he could hold in his hands. He had been certain they would not look. Why would they, one night? One server, one nobody. He had been wrong about that, he just did not know it yet. Back in the present, Saurin was asleep in the backseat of the rideshare, his cheek pressed against the window, one hand curled around the silver charm that Kael had slipped back onto his wrist without thinking. The city moved past in streaks of orange light and late traffic. Kael stared at his phone, at the banking notification, at the unknown number. He thought about the tall, still man in the black suit. He thought about the way Lucien Viley used to go quiet before saying something that mattered. And then he thought about the 3 black vehicles that had been parked outside the venue. He pulled up the ride-share app. There was a car following them. 2 blocks back, black, moving at exactly their speed. Kael's apartment lock clicked open at 11:47 at night, and he got Saurin inside in under 4 seconds. He did not turn on the lights. He moved through the dark by habit, settling Saurin onto the couch, pulling the blanket from the armchair, covering him without waking him. Then he went to the window and stood to the side of the frame and looked down at the street without showing his face. 1 black vehicle, parked directly across from the building entrance. Engine off, no movement. He pulled out his phone and called the only number he had for situations like this, which was a legal aid volunteer named Precious Ihijurika in New Jersey who had helped him set up his custody documentation 3 years ago when he had started to worry about exactly this kind of moment. The call went to voicemail. He left nothing. He hung up, he checked his banking app again. The review notice was still there. No explanation, no timeline, no amount listed as available. He checked his email. A message from his landlord sent at 10:52 that evening, 40 minutes after he had left the event. Routine lease review. Please confirm availability for a walkthrough within 48 hours. He set the phone face down on the counter. He went to the hall closet and pulled out a box from the top shelf, the one Saurin had somehow found, the one Kael had believed was invisible. Inside was a manila envelope with documents, a burner phone he had never activated, $300 in cash, and beneath all of that, a photograph he had not looked at in 2 years. 3 men in black suits at a Manhattan fundraiser. Shot from a distance, printed from an article he had found online and kept without fully understanding why. He looked at Lucien's face in the photograph for a long time. Then he heard the knock, not frantic, not aggressive. 3 measured knocks on his apartment door at midnight, with the patience of someone who was absolutely certain the door was going to open. Kael put the box back. He went to the door. He did not open it. Who is it? A pause. You already know. Cashin Viley's voice was exactly as Kael remembered it. Surgical, unhurried, the kind of voice that had been trained since birth to never need to repeat itself. Kael looked at Saurin, still asleep on the couch. He opened the door 3 inches, chain still on. Cashin stood in the hallway with one hand in his pocket and the other resting at his side. He was alone, or appeared to be alone. Kael had learned enough tonight to know that appearance and reality were not the same thing when it came to these men. You have my number blocked, Cashin said. I don't have your number. You had it once. He looked past Kael into the apartment without trying to be subtle about it. His gaze landed on Saurin. It stayed there for 3 full seconds. Then it came back to Kael. We should talk. It's midnight, Cashin said. It is, that was all. No threat, no demand, just the quiet acknowledgement that he was standing in a hallway at midnight outside the apartment of a man who had run 5 years ago and been found in one evening, and that the hour was merely a detail. Kael closed the door. He heard Cashin breathe once on the other side. Then footsteps moving back down the hallway. Measured, calm, Kael turned and leaned against the door and looked at his sleeping son. The silver charm on Saurin's wrist caught the light from the street coming through the window. Round, thin, engraved on the back with a V and a date. Kael had never been able to make himself look at directly. He had told himself he kept it for no reason. Habit, sentimentality, the irrational way people hold on to things from the nights that changed them. He understood now, standing in his dark apartment with his son asleep and a Viley in the hallway, that there is no such thing as keeping something for no reason. Everything we hold on to is a door we never fully closed. His phone lit up on the counter. A new message from the unknown number. 3 words, we found you. By 7 the next morning, the lease review email had become a phone call. Kael stood in his kitchen, listening to his landlord explain, in the careful, apologetic tone of a man who had been spoken to by someone with more authority than a tenant, that the building management company had flagged his unit for a compliance review related to subletting regulations. There was no subletting. There had never been any subletting. Kael said so. His landlord said he understood and that it was probably nothing and that someone would be in touch within 24 hours. He hung up. He made Saurin's breakfast. scrambled eggs and toast with the crust cut off because Saurin was 4 and had decided at some point that crust was a personal offense. He poured orange juice into the cup with the blue lid. He sat Saurin at the table and watched him eat and thought about the word compliance and what it meant when people with unlimited resources decided to be creative with it. By 9, a payment platform he used for freelance graphic work sent him an automated message. Account verification required. Funds on hold pending review. By 10, a client who owed him $1,100 for a completed project wrote to say he was pausing all contractor payments while his company underwent an internal audit. By 11, Saurin's school sent a message through the parent portal asking Kael to contact the administrative office regarding an inquiry from a third party about emergency guardianship documentation. Kael read that message 3 times. Then he sat down at his kitchen table and pressed both hands flat against the surface and breathed through his nose and counted to 8 the way he had taught himself to do in the first year in Texas, when the fear had been so constant it lived in his chest like a second heartbeat. They were not coming for Saurin with force, they were coming for everything around Saurin, for the structure that made Kael look like stability, for the financial foundation that a family court would look at and call safe. They were demonstrating, quietly and methodically and without a single raised voice, what happened when a person with no money and no connections tried to stand between a billionaire family and something they had decided was theirs. It was not a threat, it was a preview. Kael got Saurin dressed. He dropped him at the neighbor's apartment 3 floors down, a retired woman named Miss Adiz Chukwu who watched him sometimes in emergencies and asked no questions in exchange for a jar of the honey Kael bought from the farmer's market on Saturdays. Then he went back upstairs and sat at his laptop and called up the legal aid organization's website and found Precious Ihidrika's direct line and called it. She picked up on the second ring. He explained as much as he could in under 4 minutes. The Viley name, the lease review, the frozen payment account, the school inquiry about guardianship, the cars outside his building. There was a silence on the line, then Precious said in a low, controlled voice, "Kael, if they initiate a formal paternity case and your financials look disrupted at the time of filing, a family court judge will look at the comparison between your situation and theirs and call it a stability gap. That's how they do it. They don't take the child. They make you look like you can't keep him." He already knew that. Hearing it said plainly still made the room tilt slightly. He thanked her. He told her he would call back. He ended the call and looked at the ceiling for a moment, then there was a knock at his door. Soft, unhurried, not Cashin's knock. He knew that one now. He opened the door. Lucen Viley stood in the hallway alone. No jacket, no guards visible. One hand holding a manila folder, the other relaxed at his side. He looked at Kael with the same expression he had worn in that Manhattan stairwell 5 years ago, the one that had always seemed to be waiting for something rather than demanding it. "Not here with them," Lucen said. "I came by myself. That distinction stopped mattering about 4 hours ago," Kael said. Lucen accepted that without argument. He held out the folder. Kael did not take it immediately. He looked at it, then at Lucen, then back at it. He took it. He opened it at the kitchen table with Lucen standing inside the doorway, not sitting, not moving, not speaking. The folder contained printed documents, surveillance reports, credit pulls, address verifications. A timeline going back 4.5 years. They had known where he was, not always, but they had found him before tonight. He turned to the last page, a photograph taken from a distance, slightly grainy, printed on plain paper. A hospital entrance in Austin, Texas. A man in a grey shirt and a blue beanie hat holding a newborn wrapped in a yellow blanket. Kael remembered that hat. He had bought it 2 days before Saurin was born because the hospital was cold and he had not thought far enough ahead to pack one. He sat very still. "You knew," he said. "Yes," Lucen said. "For how long?" 2 years after you left, give or take. Room was very quiet. Through the wall, Kael could hear the neighbor's television. "And you didn't come." Lucen said nothing for a moment. When he spoke, it was careful and low. "Our father was alive then. The family situation was not safe. Not for you, not for the child." Kael looked up from the photograph. "So you decided that for me?" Lucen did not look away. "Yes," it was the honesty that made it worse. No deflection. No excuse dressed up as protection. Just yes. Kael closed the folder. He did not throw it. He did not shout. He set it on the table with both hands flat on top of it and looked at the man standing in his doorway and felt every single day of the last 5 years press against the back of his ribs at once. Every overnight shift, every unpaid bill held for 1 more week. Every morning Saurin asked a question about fathers and Kael built an answer out of whatever felt both true and survivable. "Get out," Kael said. "Quiet, absolute." Lucen picked up nothing, left the folder, walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "On the last page," he said. "Turn it over." Then he left. Kael sat at the table for 2 full minutes without moving. Then he opened the folder. He turned the photograph over. On the back, in handwriting he did not recognize but somehow knew immediately, were 4 words. "I looked for you." Kael did not sleep. He sat at his kitchen table until the sky outside his window went from black to blue to the flat pale grey of early morning. and he read those 4 words on the back of that photograph 11 times, and he still did not know what to do with them. He was not going to let them mean what they wanted to mean. He was not built for that kind of softness right now. Softness was for people whose bank accounts had not been reviewed overnight, whose leases had not been quietly flagged, whose child's school had not received a call from a third party about guardianship. He needed to think clearly. He called Miss Adiz at 7 and asked if Saurin could stay a little longer. She said yes, same as always, no questions. He made coffee. He opened his laptop. He looked up everything he had not let himself look up in 5 years, the Viley triplets. There was more than he expected and less than he feared. Cash and Viley, the oldest by 4 minutes, ran the family's holdings through a private equity structure based in New York. His name appeared in SEC disclosures and board rosters and 2 profiles in financial publications, both of which described him in the same word, precise. Darian Viley appeared more often in social coverage than financial, charity events, gallery openings. The occasional tech conference in California, where he spoke on stage with the ease of someone who had done it since adolescence. One profile called him the most dangerous kind of man, the kind who makes you trust him before you understand what you have given up. Lucien Viley appeared almost nowhere. One brief mention in a 2021 article about a family foundation. One photograph at a private summit that Kael almost did not find, buried in an archived event gallery. In it, Lucien was standing at the edge of a room looking at something outside the camera's frame, and he had exactly the same expression he had worn in Kael's hallway the night before. Kael closed the laptop. He called Lucien's number, the one that had been stored in his phone for 5 years without ever being dialed. He had told himself he kept it in case of emergencies. He understood now that was not entirely true. Lucien answered on the first ring, said nothing, just waited. You said you stopped the search from becoming a retrieval, Kael said. I want to know what that means. Another pause. Can I come up? No, talk from where you are. A breath. Then, when we first found evidence you had left New York, Cashin wanted to send investigators immediately. Full trace, legal preparation. He believed if there was a child, the family had a right to know. I believed if there was a child, the child's parent had a right to choose. Especially given what our family looked like at that time. Kael leaned against the counter. What did it look like? Our father was running things. He was not a man who saw people outside his bloodline as anything other than variables. An omega with no documented standing and a child who was not yet confirmed as a Viley heir would not have been treated as a person in that house. They would have been treated as a situation to manage. Coffee mug in Kael's hand was warm. He focused on that, on the specific, ordinary warmth of it. So you protected him, Kael said. My son, from your own family. I protected you both, Lucien said, imperfectly, without telling you. I understand why that feels like a second wound. Apartment was quiet. Down the hall, someone else's alarm went off and was silenced. Your father, Kael said, is he still? Died 14 months ago. So that was why tonight had happened. That was why the event, the cars, the folder, all of it had arrived now instead of a year ago or 3 years ago. The variable that had kept Lucien from approaching had been removed. And in the absence of that variable, the other 2 brothers had moved immediately. Kael set the mug down. What do Cashin and Darian want? What they always want. Certainty, control, a clean structure for the succession. A pause that felt like Lucien choosing his words with both hands. There is significant inheritance architecture tied to legitimate heirs. Saurin's existence, if confirmed, would alter the distribution of control across several trust structures. There it was. The thing under all the other things. Saurin was not just a child to them. He was a stake in a machine. And what do you want? Kael said. The silence before Lucien answered was long enough that Kael almost repeated the question. Then Lucien said, I want to know him, that's all. Not a legal arrangement, not a position in a trust. I want to know who he is. Kael closed his eyes. He thought about Saurin walking straight across a room full of billionaires and grabbing a stranger's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. He thought about what Saurin had said in the rideshare. He smelled like the picture, the one in your box, the one you think I don't know about. He opened his eyes. Cashin and Darian, he said, are they going to stop? Unless something makes them. You make them. Another long pause. Possibly, Lucien said. At a cost. What cost? My position in the family's decision-making structure. If I move against the direction they've agreed on, I lose votes. I lose standing. It weakens me inside the organization significantly. Kael thought about that, about a man who had sat on a stairwell in Manhattan and talked about ordinary things and had, apparently, spent the next 5 years quietly keeping a wall between his brothers and a child he had never met. About what that meant, about whether it mattered. If I let you have access to him, Kael said slowly, not legal, not documented, just time, would that be enough for you to pull Cashin and Darian back? Lucien was quiet for a moment. It would give me something to work with, he said. It is not a guarantee. I'm not asking for a guarantee, I'm asking if it's worth trying. Lucien said, it is worth trying. Kael exhaled through his nose. He crossed the apartment and opened the door. Lucien was standing in the hallway. Not because he had been on his way up. He had been there the entire call, standing quietly outside the door, phone to his ear, waiting. Kael looked at him for a long moment, then he stepped aside. Lucien walked in. He stopped in the center of the small living room and looked at the space the way you look at a place you have imagined for a long time. The drawings on the refrigerator, the small sneakers by the door, the cup with the blue lid still on the table from breakfast. He said nothing. Kael went to the window. He did not look at Lucen. He looked at the street below and asked the question he had been carrying in his chest since the night before. Charm, he said, on his wrist. Which one of you put it in my coat pocket that night? A long silence. You already know, Lucen said, and Kael did. He had known before he asked. He turned. Lucen was not looking at the drawings or the sneakers or the blue cup anymore. He was looking at Kael. And there was nothing calculated in his expression, nothing strategic, just the face of a man standing very still at the edge of something he had been approaching for 5 years and was terrified to get wrong. Need you to understand something, Kael said, before we go any further, before I let you anywhere near him. Lucen waited. He is mine, Kael said. Whatever biology says, whatever your family's lawyers say, whatever trust document says, he is mine. I built his whole world. I was there for every fever and every nightmare, and every morning when he asked me questions I didn't know how to answer. If you want to be in his life, you come through me. You respect what I built. You do not use him to fix anything inside your family machine. The moment I see that happening, this ends. Lucen looked at him for a long time, then he nodded, not casually, not the nod of a powerful man agreeing with a subordinate to move things forward. The slow, deliberate nod of someone accepting terms they know they have no right to negotiate against. Understood, he said. Kael turned back to the window. Call Miss Adiz, he said. Give me 10 minutes. He pulled out his phone. He started to dial. Behind him, Lucen sat down on the edge of the couch without being invited. He sat the same way he had sat on that Manhattan stairwell 5 years ago, quietly, like a man who had learned that some doors only open if you stop pushing. His eyes moved to the blue cup on the table. He reached out and turned it slowly until the small painted truck on the side was facing him. He looked at it for a long time, and then so quietly that Kael almost did not hear it. I looked for you, Lucen said. From the moment you were gone. I want you to know that wasn't just something I wrote on a photograph. Kael stopped dialing. He did not turn around. He stood at the window with the phone in his hand, and the morning light coming in flat and pale across the floor, and he listened to the silence that followed and felt something he had buried very deliberately 5 years ago begin, slowly, to move. Then his phone rang, not a call. An alert from Saurin's school portal, emergency contact notification. Child not present for morning drop-off. Please confirm. Kael turned. Lucen was already on his feet. They looked at each other. And Kael felt the floor drop out from under him. The school portal notification was still glowing on Kael's phone screen when he hit the door running. Miss Adiz met him in the hallway of her apartment with both hands pressed to her cheeks and her voice coming out in pieces. She had gone to make Saurin a second cup of cocoa. She had been gone 4 minutes, maybe 5. The front door had been unlocked because her granddaughter was expected. 4 minutes, maybe 5. Kael did not wait for the rest. He took the stairwell down 3 floors at a speed that made his knees burn. He hit the building lobby and pushed through the front door and stood on the sidewalk and turned in both directions and saw nothing. Just the ordinary morning street. A woman walking a dog, a delivery truck idling at the corner, 2 kids on bikes moving away from him down the block. Lucen was behind him before he finished turning. Call Cashin, Kael said. His voice came out flat. Controlled in the way that happens when a person's fear exceeds the capacity of their body to express it, and everything goes quiet and cold instead. I already did, Lucen said. He had his phone to his ear. His face was the stillest Kael had ever seen it. He's not answering. Darian, a pause. Lucen lowered the phone and looked at Kael and said nothing. That said everything. Kael's hand closed into a fist at his side. If Darian took him, I don't know that yet, Lucen. I do not know that yet. It was not a reassurance. It was a wall going up. Lucen was thinking the same way he had been thinking every time Kael watched him, behind the eyes and underneath the surface, running calculations that did not show on his face. If Darian moved on the child without telling me, he did it because he knew I would stop him. Which means he planned this before last night. Which means he knew you were going to come to me, Kael said. He knew you were going to try to pull them back, so he moved first. Lucen did not answer. That was its own answer. Kael was already walking. He pulled up the rideshare app and then stopped because he did not know where to go. And not knowing where to go was the worst feeling he had ever felt in his body. Worse than the pregnancy test on the gas station floor. Worse than the first month in Texas when he had $17 in his account and a newborn who needed formula. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number that was not the same unknown number as before. New digits, new phone, he is fine, he is safe. This is not what you think it is. Come to the address below alone. No, Lucen, an address followed, a neighborhood in North Dallas. 40 minutes away, Kael stared at the screen. Lucen read it over his shoulder and said immediately, do not go alone. He's my son. Darian is using that. That is the entire mechanism. He wants you isolated and he wants me out of reach so he can present you with an agreement before I can. He has Saurin. Kael turned and looked at Lucen directly. I understand what you are saying. I understand it is a trap. I am going. Lucen looked at him for 3 full seconds, then he pulled out his own phone and made a call and said 4 words into it. Track my location. Stay back. He slid the phone into his pocket and looked at Kael. I'll drop you 2 blocks from the address. You go in. I stay close but out of sight. The moment anything changes, I am through that door. Kael did not thank him. He got in the car. The address was a private residence in a gated community that let Kael's rideshare through on a guest list that had clearly been prepared in advance. The house was large and deliberately understated, the kind of wealth that did not need to announce itself. Kael rang the bell and Darian vilely opened the door himself. No staff visible, no guards in the entryway, just Darian in a pale grey shirt and dark slacks, looking like a man who had been expecting company for brunch. He's in the living room, Darian said. He ate already, pancakes. He told me he only likes the ones with blueberries. I had someone run out. Kael walked past him without a word. Saurin was on the floor of a large, bright living room surrounded by building blocks that had clearly been purchased that morning, the packaging still sitting on the side table. He looked up when Kael came in and smiled the specific smile of a child who does not yet understand that they have detonated their parents' entire nervous system. Dad, look what I built. Kael crossed the room, dropped to his knees, and pulled Saurin against his chest so hard the boy made a small surprised sound. He held him for 10 seconds without speaking. Saurin patted his back the way children do when they think adults are being dramatic. Then Kael set him back, checked his face and his hands and his wrists and found nothing wrong and told him to keep building. He stood. He turned. Darian was leaning in the doorway with his arms crossed and the same calm half-smile Kael had seen at the investor event. I didn't take him to scare you. I took him because I needed to talk to you without Lucen filtering the conversation. You took my 4-year-old son from a babysitter's apartment at 7 in the morning to have a conversation, Kael said. Each word came out separated, precise, without asking, without warning, without any kind of consent from me. I left him with your neighbor. She walked him down herself. I did not force anything. Manipulated a 70-year-old woman who trusts people because she does not know what you are. Darian tilted his head slightly. And what am I, Kael? You're the brother who does the thing no one can technically call illegal and then smiles about it afterward. Something moved across Darian's face. Not anger, almost something like respect, which was in many ways more unsettling. He unfolded his arms and moved to a chair across the room and sat down and became very businesslike, very fast. He talked about trust structures, voting blocks, succession protocols written into the family's foundational documents by their father 20 years ago. He talked about what a confirmed legitimate heir meant for the internal balance of the Viley organization. He used the word stabilization 4 times. He talked about what a private clean custody arrangement would look like. Saurin would want for nothing. Kael would receive a settlement structured to eliminate every financial pressure currently active in his life. The lease, the accounts, the school inquiry, all of it would disappear. He made it sound like solving a problem. He made Saurin sound like a variable in an equation. And all the while Saurin sat on the floor 12 feet away and stacked blocks and hummed to himself and did not look up. Kael listened to all of it. He let Darian finish. He waited for the full silence at the end, then he said, "No." Darian blinked. "Kael, no arrangement, no settlement, no structure. He is not a line item." Kael looked at Saurin and then back at Darian. "Whatever you've put into motion with the lease and the accounts, reverse it, today, because if you don't, I will stand in front of every camera at your next public event and say your family name and my son's name in the same sentence and let the world do the math." Darian was quiet. "Lucen warned me you were not going to make this easy," he said finally. Lucen was right. Darian stood. He smoothed the front of his shirt. He looked at Kael the way a man looks at a locked door he thought he had the key for. "This is not finished," he said. "I know," Kael said, "but it's finished for today." He picked up Saurin and carried him out. 2 blocks away, Lucen was leaning against a parked car with his arms at his sides and his eyes on the street. When he saw Kael come around the corner with Saurin on his hip, something happened in his expression that Kael could not look at for too long without feeling something he was not ready to name. That night, Saurin was quiet at dinner. He ate without asking for seconds. He put his fork down before the plate was clear, which he never did. Kael watched him. "You okay, baby?" Saurin looked up. "Did I make everybody fight?" The fork in Kael's hand went still. "No," he said immediately. "But they're fighting about me. They're fighting about things that were already broken before you came along." Kael set down his own fork and leaned forward. "None of this is because of you. You hear me? Not one piece of it." Saurin looked at him for a moment with those green eyes that always seemed to be processing more than a 4-year-old should be able to process. Then he picked his fork back up and ate a piece of broccoli without being asked, which was so uncharacteristic that it made Kael's chest hurt in a way he could not explain. He put Saurin to bed at 8. He read 2 chapters of the book about the raccoon who builds a boat. He sat in the dark after the lamp went off and listened to his son breathe. Then he went to check the window. The vehicles across the street were back, but this time, only one of them was a Viley car. The other 2 were something else, unmarked, different plates. The kind of vehicle that does not belong to a billionaire family but might belong to someone a billionaire family hired to apply a different kind of pressure. Kael pulled out his phone and called Lucen. There are cars outside my building, he said. 2 of them are not yours. A pause. I see them, Lucen said. I'm across the street. Darian. Then who? Silence before Lucen answered was the longest one yet. Our father had associates, Lucen said carefully. Men who managed certain situations for the family. Men who never fully transferred their loyalty when he died. Another pause. They may have been engaged by Cashin independently, without my knowledge. Kael stood at the window and looked at those 2 unmarked cars and felt the threat upgrade from financial pressure to something older and colder, and without the civilized wrapper that Darian at least put around his moves. Lucen, he said. I'm handling it, Lucen said immediately. Do not open the door for anyone tonight, I mean anyone. The call ended. Kael went to Saurin's doorway and stood there for a long time watching his son sleep. And for the first time since this whole thing began, he understood that the real danger had never been the Viley brothers. It was everything they had inherited from the man who built them. At 2:14 in the morning, Kael checked on Saurin and the bed was empty. The blanket was folded. Not thrown aside, not tangled, not the chaos of a child who rolled out of sleep in a hurry. Folded, deliberately. The pillow was set on top. On the pillow was a piece of paper torn from the coloring book. Saurin's handwriting was 4 years old and looked like it. Crooked letters, uneven spacing, but legible enough because Kael had spent months teaching him each one and Saurin had treated the whole exercise like a project that mattered. If I fix it, maybe you stop being sad, Kael read it once. Then he was moving down the hallway through the apartment, front door open, stairwell, lobby, street. No jacket, no keys, phone in hand. He called Lucen before he hit the sidewalk and Lucen answered before the first ring finished. Saurin is gone, Kael said. He left on his own. Silence on the other end lasted exactly 1 second. Coming around the block, Lucen said. Right now. Car reached him in under 90 seconds. Kael got in. He held the note in both hands in his lap and read it again, and felt the specific devastation that belongs only to parents who realize their child has been quietly carrying weight that was never meant for them. 4 years old. Folded his blanket. Left a note. Walked out of a locked apartment and down a hallway and through a building and out into a Dallas night because he had decided it was his responsibility to fix something broken adults had laid at his feet without meaning to. Kael's hands were shaking, not from cold. Where would he go, Lucen said. He was driving, calm voice, eyes on the street. Think about what he knows, what he's seen, what he heard. Kael pulled the edges of the last 24 hours apart in his mind. Saurin at the dinner table with his fork down. Saurin asking if he made everybody fight. Saurin eating the broccoli without being asked like a child who had decided to be very good for reasons that had nothing to do with broccoli. He heard me on the phone, Kael said slowly. I called you from the kitchen. He might have been in the hallway. What did I say that he could hear? Kael closed his eyes and ran it back, the conversation about Cashin, the family associates, the unmarked cars, and before that the conversation about what it would take to pull the brothers back, about giving Lucen time with Saurin, about the Viley Foundation, the foundation. Kael opened his eyes. Darian mentioned a foundation event, a press event. When we were at the house this morning, he mentioned it in passing, something about a charitable showcase at a private hangar near the Florida border. Tomorrow, he said. He was talking about the family's public presence. Saurin was on the floor. I thought he wasn't listening. Lucen was already recalculating. Darian's foundation event is at a private airstrip outside Gainesville. They do it every year. There is a public-facing reception in the front hangar. Anyone can approach the gate. Saurin thinks if he proposes again, everybody stops fighting, Kael said. The words tasted like something broken. He thinks he started it by proposing to you at the event, so he thinks he can end it. Car was already moving faster. He knows about the foundation somehow, Lucen said, because Darian left a brochure on the table this morning when I was there, glossy, the kind with photographs. Saurin saw it, he sees everything. It was a 4-hour drive without traffic. Lucen got them there in 3.5. Kael did not sleep. He sat in the passenger seat and watched the highway and held Saurin's note, and did not say a word for 200 miles because there were no words large enough for what he was feeling. They reached the airstrip at 6 in the morning. The foundation event did not begin until 9. But the gates were already partially staffed, and 2 large media vans were setting up outside the perimeter fence. And sitting on a concrete barrier 20 feet from the main gate, wrapped in his jacket, backpack on his lap, silver charm on his wrist, was Saurin. Kael was out of the car before it stopped completely. He crossed the distance in seconds. He dropped to his knees on the concrete in front of his son and grabbed him by both arms and looked at his face, and said his name 3 times before his voice caught, and he could not finish the 4th. Saurin looked at him with the expression of someone who has been waiting a long time and is relieved, but also still very committed to the original plan. I was going to wait for them to come, Saurin explained. Then I was going to tell them to stop. Kael pulled him in and held him. He held him the way you hold something you almost lost in a way that has no recovery. When he finally let go, he sat back on his heels and looked at his son and said, You are never, ever allowed to leave without me, for any reason, for any plan, no matter how good the plan seems. Do you understand me? Saurin considered this seriously. Even if the plan works. Even then, a van door slammed behind them, then another. Kael heard voices, production crew waking up the setup, someone calling about cable runs for the cameras. He became aware slowly that they were in a very public space that was about to become significantly more public in 3 hours. He stood. He turned and found all three Viley brothers standing 10 feet away. He had not heard them arrive. No sound, no announcement, just Cashin and Darian and Lucen in a line, in the grey early morning light outside a Florida airstrip, looking at a 4-year-old boy sitting on a concrete barrier with a small backpack and a note he had written himself. No one spoke for a moment. Then one of the media crew near the vans looked over, recognized a face, reached for a camera out of reflex. And something snapped into place inside Kael that had been building since the investor event, since the lease notice, since the photograph in the folder, since Darian's living room, since the folded blanket and the note on the pillow. He stood up, he turned toward the three of them, and he did not lower his voice, and he did not measure what he was saying for palatability or audience or consequence. "You built a machine," he said. "A machine made of money and lawyers and phone calls and lease reviews and frozen accounts and cars parked outside my building at 2 in the morning. And you aimed it at a single parent and a 4-year-old boy, and you called it a family matter." His voice did not rise. It did the opposite. It went lower and steadier and colder. "You do not get to call this protection. You do not get to show up at a press event in matching suits and position yourselves as fathers. You have never been his fathers. You have been a threat in different suits." Cashin's jaw was tight. Darian looked at the ground for the first time since Kael had met him. Lucen said nothing. He was looking at Saurin. A camera clicked somewhere behind them. Kael heard it. He did not flinch. "If any legal action comes at me," he said, "I will stand in front of every camera at every public event your family touches, and I will describe in exact detail what the last 48 hours looked like. The school portal inquiry, the accounts, the lease, the man who let himself into a building and walked a 4-year-old boy out of a babysitter's apartment without consent." Darian looked up sharply. "Have documentation," Kael said. "I have timestamps. I have texts from an unknown number that a forensic accountant can probably trace in under a week." He looked at each of them in turn. "Come at me again and I will use all of it." The morning was quiet. The camera clicked a second time, and then Lucen stepped forward. He stepped in front of his brothers and he turned, not toward Kael, but toward the media vans, toward the crew that had started to pay attention, toward the 2 reporters who had gotten out of a car and were now standing very still with their phones up. "Any legal action against Kael Omolade ends now," he said, loud enough to carry, clear enough to be recorded. "Any financial interference, any housing review, any inquiry into guardianship or custody ends today. If anyone in this family moves against him again, they will be moving against me first." He turned and looked at his brothers. "Try me," he said. Cashin said nothing. Darian put his phone in his pocket. The morning held. Saurin slid off the concrete barrier and walked over to Lucen and took his hand the way he had at the investor event, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Lucen looked down at him. His expression did something it had never done in any of the hours Kael had spent watching him. It broke open just slightly, just enough. The way stone does when water has been working at it for a very long time. 3 days later, Lucen showed up at Kael's apartment with a paper bag of groceries and no explanation. Kael stood in the open doorway and looked at him. "I thought you were handling Cashin and Darian," Kael said. "I am," Lucen said. "I also thought you might not have gone to the store." He had not. The last 3 days had been the kind of exhausted that makes a grocery run feel like planning an expedition. Kael stepped aside and let him in. Lucen did not try to make himself at home. He set the bag on the counter and unpacked it carefully. Eggs, bread, blueberries, orange juice. A small container of something that turned out to be pre-made mac and cheese from the good brand, the one Kael bought when his budget had room. He noticed Lucen had paid attention. Somewhere in the wreckage of the last 4 days, he had paid attention to what Saurin ate and what cup he used, and what the inside of this kitchen needed. Kael sat at the table and watched him put things away and told himself that noticing this did not mean anything. Saurin came out of his room 17 minutes later, dragging a toy truck by its back wheel, and stopped when he saw Lucen at the counter. He did not run to him. He walked up slowly and stood at the edge of the kitchen and looked at him with the serious measuring expression he used when he was deciding something. "Did you fix it?" Saurin asked. Lucen turned. He crouched down so they were at the same level. "Working on it," he said. "Not finished yet." Saurin considered this. "Okay." He held out the truck. "You can play with this while you work on it." Lucen took the truck. He looked at it for a moment. Then he sat down on the kitchen floor without hesitation, without looking to see if anyone was watching, without any adjustment to the performance of being a man who ran an organization worth 9 figures and had not sat on a floor in probably 15 years. He set the truck down. He pushed it forward slowly. The wheels made a small sound on the tile. Saurin sat down across from him and they played with the truck quietly for 11 minutes. Kael made coffee. He stood at the counter and watched his son and Lucen Viley on the kitchen floor, and he thought about all the years he had spent being afraid of this exact family, and about what it cost to be wrong about something for a very long time. The legal pressure dissolved in stages. Not dramatically, not with a press conference or a signed declaration. The lease review notice was followed by a correction email from building management. The payment platform unfroze his account. The client who had paused his contract wrote to say the internal audit had concluded and his payment would process by Friday. The school portal inquiry closed with no action taken. Lucen had done what he said he would do. At cost. In the 3 days since the airstrip, he had lost 2 votes on a family trust committee and ceded decision-making authority over a media subsidiary that had been under his direct control for 4 years. Kael learned this not from Lucen, but from an email Precious Ihijurika forwarded him from a legal contact who tracked the Viley organization's internal filings. He had not told Kael, he had just done it. Kael held that information for a day without knowing what to do with it. Then he went to the hall closet and took out the box from the top shelf and opened it, and went through it with the deliberate steadiness of someone who has decided to stop managing their own past from a safe distance. He found the photograph. He turned it over. I looked for you. He had read those words 40 times in 5 days. Each time they meant something slightly different. Each time the thing they meant moved a little closer to something he could not dismiss as strategy or manipulation or the particular intelligence of a man who knew how to say the right thing. He found something else in the box. Under the photograph, something he had forgotten was in there, a folded receipt from a diner outside Newark, New Jersey. Dated 5 years and 2 months ago. On the back, in his own handwriting, were 3 lines he had written the morning after everything changed, when he was sitting in a booth at Sixham with coffee he could not afford and a decision he had not made yet. He can never know. He would never let me keep him. I have to go. He sat on the closet floor and read his own handwriting and thought about the version of himself who had written those lines. Young, terrified, completely alone. Making a decision that made perfect sense in the dark and cost 5 years of a different kind of loneliness. He thought about what Lucen had said on the stairwell that night in New York, about small things, ordinary things. He thought about the way that conversation had felt like the only honest one he had in months. He folded the receipt and put it in his pocket. That evening after Saurin was asleep, Lucen was in the kitchen washing the dinner dishes because he had apparently decided this was something he did now, and Kael stood in the doorway and said, "You missed a call today. I heard your phone go off 4 times during dinner." "Investor meeting," Lucen said. He did not turn around. "Important, probably." He set a plate in the drying rack. "Saurin was telling me about the raccoon book. I was listening." Kael leaned against the doorframe. Lucen. "The night at the summit in New York." He paused. "Did you know, that night, did you already know what you felt?" Lucen turned the water off. He stood at the sink with his back still toward Kael for a moment. Then he turned around. His hands were wet. He did not reach for the towel. "I knew before you left the stairwell," he said. "I told myself it was the hour, the conversation, that it would be different in the morning." A pause. "It was not different in the morning." Kael looked at him. "Then you disappeared," Lucen said, "and I looked for you, and when I found evidence of where you had gone, I did the math on what showing up would have meant, what my family looked like, what my father would have done with a vulnerable Omega and an undocumented child." He exhaled. "I made a choice that I have spent 5 years being unsure was the right one." "It wasn't," Kael said plainly. "It should have been my choice to make, not yours." Lucen said, "I know that." Kitchen was quiet. The drying rack had 4 plates in it and a blue cup turned upside down to drain. "I'm not forgiving you tonight," Kael said. "I'm not asking for tonight. I don't know when. That's okay." Kael looked at him for a long moment. Then he pushed off the doorframe and went to the counter and opened the box of tea he kept next to the coffee maker and pulled out 2 bags without asking. It was not forgiveness, but it was 2 cups of tea instead of 1. And Lucen picked up the towel and dried his hands and did not say another word. He just stood there, in a small kitchen in Dallas, Texas, present in the specific, undramatic, completely ordinary way that means more than anything a person can say. Kael put both mugs on the table. He sat down. And after a moment, Lucen sat across from him. And the night went quiet around both of them in a way that felt, for the first time in 5 years, like something other than survival. Darian Viley sent the meeting request at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. He called it a family alignment session. The email was 3 sentences long, professionally warm, and contained the address of a private conference facility in uptown Dallas that billed itself as a discreet venue for sensitive business matters. Kael read the email twice. He showed it to Lucen, who read it and said nothing for a long moment and then said, "He's calling it damage control. It's a tribunal." "I know," Kael said. "He expects you to arrive unprepared. He expects the setting to establish authority before you even sit down." "I know," Kael said again. "What are you going to do?" Kael set his coffee down. "I'm going to go." Facility was exactly what Lucen had described, quietly expensive. A long conference table in a room with no windows, 3 chairs on one side, 1 on the other. Cashin and Darian were already seated when Kael arrived. Cashin had a folder. Darian had nothing on the table in front of him, which was somehow worse. A 3rd chair on their side was empty. Lucen sat in it. Darian looked at him with an expression that had no warmth in it at all. "This was supposed to be a private conversation." "Then you should have specified that," Lucen said. He placed both hands flat on the table. "Go ahead, Darian." Darian looked at Kael. He opened with the language of resolution, of mutual benefit. of protecting the child from the instability of prolonged conflict. He talked about a private custodial arrangement again, worded differently this time, softer around the edges, with numbers attached that were designed to make Kael feel seen and compensated and finished. He made it sound like a gift. Kael let him finish. Then Kael opened the bag he had brought with him and set 7 items on the table. A printed bank statement showing his account balance the morning after the investor event and the morning of the freeze. A screenshot of the lease review email with timestamp. A copy of the school portal Guardian inquiry. A printout of the payment platform hold notice. A text thread from the unknown number. A photograph of the unmarked vehicles outside his building, taken from his window at 2 a.m. And last, the receipt from the Newark diner, 5 years old, with his own handwriting on the back. He did not explain each item. He let them sit there, then he spoke. He did not talk about money or trust structures or succession documents. He talked about the first winter in Texas when Saurin had an ear infection that lasted 3 weeks, and Kael worked a double shift on the 3rd week because the copay for the follow-up appointment was $60 he did not have. He talked about the school application he filled out 4 times because he kept making errors from exhaustion and starting over. He talked about the Saturday mornings he spent at the farmer's market because it was the only outing that cost nothing and Saurin loved the honey vendor's dog. He talked about the nights Saurin woke up scared and Kael sat on the floor of his room until the fear passed, not because he had the energy, but because the child needed him to have it, and so he did. He talked about what ordinary devotion looks like when no one is watching and no one is keeping score and there is no audience and no legacy and no succession document that cares. He talked for 11 minutes. When he stopped, the room was completely silent. Cashin was looking at the table, not the documents, the surface of the table. Like a man doing a private accounting of something that had nothing to do with money, Darian had his hands folded in front of him. His half-smile was gone. It had been gone for about 6 minutes. Lucen said nothing. He did not need to. Kael looked at Darian. Your arrangement, he said. No, he looked at Cashin. Your legal structure. He touched the edge of the school portal printout. No, he looked at both of them. Saurin is not a problem you inherited. He is not a variable in your father's documents. He is a child who folded his blanket and walked out of his apartment at 2 in the morning to fix something broken adults put in front of him. His voice stayed level, even completely without performance. You want to be in his life, then be in his life, not as owners, not as names on a trust, as people who show up and stay and earn it like everyone else. Cashin looked up. For the first time in every room they had been in together, he did not look calculated. He looked like a man who had run a particular program for so long he had forgotten it was a choice. The document structure is not optional, he said. It exists regardless of what any of us want. If Saurin is a vilely heir, the legal reality can be navigated, Lucen said. It was the first thing he had said since sitting down. It can be structured to protect Kael's parental authority and Saurin's identity without making either of them a function of the estate. I've had it drafted. It's ready when you are. Cashin looked at him. When did you have it drafted? Darian said. Days ago, Lucen said. A silence spread across the table that had different textures on each side. Then Darian said, quietly and without the smile, You've already decided. Lucen said. Cashin picked up one of Kael's documents. He looked at it. He set it back down. He looked at Kael with the eyes of a man who was very intelligent and had just understood something that his intelligence had been preventing him from seeing. Arrangement proposed today is withdrawn, Cashin said, not warmly, but clearly. Darian said nothing. Cashin looked at him. Darian exhaled. Withdrawn, he said. Kael gathered his documents back into the bag. He stood. He looked at Lucen and gave him a single nod. Lucen stood and followed him out. In the elevator going down, Kael pressed the lobby button and leaned against the wall and let out a breath that had been sitting in his chest for 9 days. Cashin, Kael said. He's going to be okay with this eventually. Cashin respects structure, Lucen said. You gave him a structure he can respect. It will take time. Darian, a pause. Darian will take longer, but he's not his father. There's still something in him that knows the difference between strategy and cruelty. He crossed a line with Saurin and he knows it. Elevator opened. They walked through the lobby. Outside, the Dallas afternoon was bright and warm and completely uninterested in anything that had just happened in a windowless room upstairs. Kael stopped on the sidewalk. I didn't do that for you, he said. What I said in there, I did it for Saurin. I know, Lucen said. I need you to know that I see the difference between what you did and what they did. I'm not putting you in the same category. Lucen was quiet. I'm also not there yet, Kael said. Wherever you want me to be, I'm not there yet. I'm not asking you to be anywhere you aren't. Kael looked at him for a moment. Then he took out his phone and called Miss Adiz and asked if Saurin could stay 1 more hour. She said yes. She always said yes. She also said that Saurin had asked her twice today whether his dad was okay, and that she had told him yes, and that Kael had better come home and prove her right. Kael smiled for the first time in 9 days. Actual and unmanaged and real. That night after dinner, Saurin climbed into Kael's lap with the raccoon book and then looked over at Lucen sitting on the other end of the couch and said in a very serious voice, If he stays, can I ask again? The question landed in the room like something that had been waiting to be said for a very long time. Kael looked at his son. He looked at Lucen. He said, "We'll see, baby." And for the first time in 5 years, "we'll see" was not a way of saying no. Weeks passed. Then more weeks, not marked by events. Marked by smaller things that accumulate into something real only if you are paying the right kind of attention. Lucen came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always at the same time. Always after checking that it was still okay, never assuming. He did not arrive with gifts or grand gestures or attempts to compress 5 years of absence into a single impressive afternoon. He arrived with consistency, which turned out to be the only currency that meant anything in Kael's house. He learned that Saurin needed exactly 12 minutes of quiet after school before he was ready to talk. He learned that the raccoon book had to be read in the same voice for the raccoon every time or the whole thing collapsed. He learned which drawer had the blue cup and where the blueberries went in the refrigerator, and that Tuesday evenings meant the farmer's market if the weather allowed. And he started coming to the farmer's market on Tuesdays, walking half a step behind because it was not his routine to lead, buying honey from the vendor whose dog Saurin called Professor on the grounds that the dog looked like he knew things. Kael watched all of it. He watched without commentary. Without softening toward it faster than felt real. Without letting the accumulation of good days erase the memory of the bad ones, because that kind of erasure is how people end up in the same rooms making the same mistakes. He watched and he noted, and he let it mean exactly as much as it had earned. Cashin reached out once. A brief message, formal and short, asking if there was a correct way to send something for Saurin's birthday in 2 months. Kael wrote back with a book title Saurin had mentioned, and a note that said no large toys and no items with the family name on them. Cashin replied, "Understood, that was all." It was, by a significant margin, the most functional communication they had ever had. Darian did not reach out, but he also did not move against them. Lucen said that was Darian working something out in private, and that private was the right place for it. Kael filed updated custody documentation through Precious Ihijurika's office. The vilely legal structure was amended to acknowledge Saurin's paternity and assign specific protections to Kael's parental authority without turning Saurin into a succession pawn. It took 11 days and 4 conference calls and 3 rounds of revisions. Lucen's attorney worked across the table from Kael's legal aid volunteer and treated her with the same professional attention he would have given any partner at any firm. Kael noticed that too. On a Wednesday in the 5th week, Lucen was in the kitchen making dinner because it had become a Thursday and Tuesday thing that had apparently migrated to Wednesday without anyone formally authorizing the expansion. And Saurin was at the table doing the worksheet his teacher had sent home, and Kael was on the couch going through invoices, and the whole apartment had a sound to it that Kael had never heard in it before, an ordinary sound. The sound of a home that had more than one person in it who wanted to be there. He sat with that for a while. After dinner, after the dishes, after the raccoon book, after Saurin was in bed, and the lamp was off and the apartment settled into its nighttime quiet, Kael found Lucen at the kitchen table with his phone face down in front of him, not on it, just sitting in the particular stillness that Kael had learned meant he was in the middle of something internal. Kael made 2 cups of tea. He sat across from him. "Investor call you keep missing on Tuesdays," Kael said. "I reschedule it. Every week. Kael looked at his cup. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Lucen said. "I want to." Tea was the kind with honey in it. Saurin had gotten very interested in the honey situation after meeting Professor the dog's vendor owner, and now there were 3 different jars in the cabinet, and Kael had been instructed to rate them. "You never asked me," Kael said. "For anything, in 5 weeks you have never once asked me for something." Lucen was quiet. "I'm not saying it as a criticism," Kael said. "I'm saying it because I noticed." "Don't want to take anything," Lucen said. "I understand the difference between being here and having a claim. I don't have a claim. I have an invitation. Those are not the same thing." Kael looked at him across the table. He thought about the Newark receipt in his jacket pocket. He thought about the folded blanket and the note on the pillow. He thought about 11 minutes in a conference room in uptown Dallas, and what it had cost to stand up and say all of it and mean all of it, and walk out without waiting for a verdict. He thought about a stairwell in Manhattan, and a conversation about ordinary things, and a night that had never been as simple as he had tried to make it afterward. He reached into his jacket pocket and put the Newark receipt on the table between them. Lucen looked at it. He recognized what it was. Kael could tell by the way his stillness deepened. "I wrote that at 6 in the morning, Kael said, "in a diner I could barely afford, before I got on a bus to Texas." He paused. "I was certain I was making the right call. I was certain you would have taken him from me. I was certain the only safe thing was to disappear." Lucen said nothing. "I was afraid," Kael said. "That's not an excuse, it's just true." "I know," Lucen said. "I think I was also," Kael stopped, started again. "I think I was afraid of something else too, something that had nothing to do with custody or power or the family name." Lucen waited. "I was afraid that you wouldn't want us," Kael said. "Not as a strategy, just us, and I didn't know how to stay somewhere with that fear present, so I left before I could find out." Kitchen was very quiet. Lucen looked at him for a long moment. "I would have wanted you," he said. "I did want you." I have been wanting the same thing since a stairwell in Manhattan, and I am not better at saying it than I was then, but I am saying it now because you deserve to hear it plainly. Kael looked at the receipt on the table between them. He picked it up, he folded it back and put it in his pocket. Then he looked at Lucen and said, I'm not ready to say I trust this completely. Lucen said, but I'm ready to stop running from it. Lucen exhaled, quietly, like something long held finally released. That's enough, he said. That is more than enough. The next morning, Saurin came to the kitchen table to find both Kael and Lucen already there with coffee and the good juice poured into the blue cup and waiting. He stopped in the doorway and looked at both of them with the measuring expression and then crossed the room and climbed into his chair and picked up his cup and took a sip. Then he set it down and looked at Lucen very seriously. You staying? He asked. Lucen looked at Kael. Kael gave him a nod that was small and real and cost nothing except 5 years of fear. Yes, Lucen said. Saurin looked satisfied. He picked the cup up again. Okay, he said. You can sit there then, that's your chair now. And he pointed at the chair across from Kael, the one Lucen had been sitting in for 5 weeks, and assigned it with the complete and total authority of a 4-year-old who has decided something and will not be negotiating. Lucen looked at the chair, then he looked at Kael. And for the first time, without any calculation behind it, without any weight of the last 5 years pulling at the edges, he smiled. Full and unguarded and quiet. The kind of smile that does not know it is happening until it is already there. Kael looked at his son and at the man across the table, and at the kitchen that had a sound in it now, a full, ordinary, unhurried sound, and he felt something inside him put down a weight he had been carrying so long he had stopped noticing it was heavy. He did not say anything. He picked up his coffee, he stayed, and staying finally felt like the safest thing he had ever done. If this story moved you, gripped you, or made you feel something real, please subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story that is built to inspire, challenge, and stay with you long after it ends. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us which moment hit you the hardest. Tell us what you would have done in Kael's place. Your voice matters here, and your story might be exactly what someone else in these comments needs to hear today. Share this with someone who loves a story that earns its ending.